Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Alrighty, so we are starting now week 2. Did anybody get to look at the PowerPoint back from home? A few of you? I encourage you to do it, and if you can, even if you don't study it in detail, just kind of go through and pick and choose different things. And you can hear music, hopefully, and they're working with that. We're all learning. This is called Learning, Lifelong Learning Institute, so we're on that learning end ourselves. So here we have Barbie Blagan. She's going to play beautifully for us today. And so she's my patient waiter in the wings here. And you know Barbie, and so this seems to change the sound. So let's scroll a little bit. I have a very special guest this morning. I'm going to save time at the end, so maybe I'm not going to play it all today because one of my students from, dare we say, he's older than we were and I'm older than we were then, 40 years ago. Haven't seen him since. And he has a little bit of a story to tell that I needed some reminders. And I'll just give you the hint. I've never had a student until this great guy here who had 0 piano lessons before he came to college. Hadn't touched a piano. Walked into my studio. I think I want to be a piano major. And I said, well, let's give it a go. And you're going to hear what happened. So it does. And that's what we do. We nurture young talents. And talent doesn't mean you're accomplished yet. That's what we do day by day, right? So we just kept adding. 6 and 8 hours a day he practiced. Yeah. Look at him right now. He's not practicing at this moment, but that's rare. But he had a different career, music therapy, and he'll tell you just a little at the end. So I'm saving time for David. Okay, so this is Barbie. There's David. I'm Stephen. Welcome to week 2. So if you can, are you having trouble? Is it difficult to get to the PowerPoint? You just didn't have, I know retired people are busy, so you maybe didn't have time. Alrighty, and maybe you're not even retired. I'm not, apparently. So here we go. Interesting. Okay, each week's PowerPoint slides, video listening are embedded. That's what we're working with a little bit. Just Google things or Safari or whatever you use. Just if you're curious, look something up and you'll learn a bunch. I hope it was fun. We called it a bird's eye view last week. You can see what I wrote. A first peek or maybe a first peck if you're a bird. So, and then I thought, well, not all birds are in the same place at the same time. So just bear with me. It's called Hesla humor. Bird's eye view depends on what stage the birds are in. I don't think those little guys can even see yet, but it was just kind of fun to So anyway, so that you can look and enjoy in your own time at home. So we're going to hear Marjorie play a couple pieces this morning that she'll be playing on her recital this year. And so we're moving into a little bit of jazz and harmonies. And we won't necessarily analyze them today, but each week we go a little bit deeper into something. And then Barbie is going to play at 10 o'clock each or a little before, the Papillon by Schumann, which means butterfly, and she'll tell you about that. And then I was going to play, but David's here, so I'll play that next week probably. Yeah, no. Okay, well, I'll play 2 notes. We'll see. I'll try to move through, and please, and maybe write down questions along the way. So a few reminders just quickly. If this is a reminder, it means you paid attention last week or I got something across. Raise your hand if you recall doctrine of affections, the idea that in Baroque music, one piece or one movement or the prelude and then the fugue, each one has its own characterization or mood or emotion, and it carries through. It can rise and fall in intensity, and even contrasting keys and harmonies, but the mood continues, if you want to call it a mood or the emotion. That's the doctrine of affections. And in the 1750s, this began to fade. And one of the great theorists, I think it was 1754, but I can't find yet the quote that I found once upon a time. And the quote was, whose emotions stay constant for 3 minutes? You know, we're always changing. So music shouldn't feel restricted by this principle of never letting the mood change. And so that opened up the whole door to what became classical style. And so when you hear this wonderful Eine kleine Nachtmusik, and we're going to look at sonata allegro form today. So there are two things I want to get across today that were just hinted at last week. And one is the classical styles development of sonata form. And the first movements of sonatas, by the way, you can jot some of these things down. A sonata is as opposed to a cantata. Cantata means sing, chant, cant, cantabile, singing tone. Cantata means a singing piece. Sonata, sound, sonar, right? So sound pieces are for instruments, not for the voice. But we all try to make our pianos sing and our violins sing and our violas sing. So we all imitate the human voice. And so the principle of one idea, one mood, one character was fading. Very specific in 1754, a music theorist wrote, this needs to go away. You know, the world changes, the moods change, our lives are constantly in flux. So that was a very definite thought. And so this paved the way for what's called sonata allegro form. I can use my little pointer, but there it is. And I try to highlight different things so you can find them quickly. And then in Italy, through a composer named Scarlatti and Corelli and lots of folks, they were developing something about music should please. Music should make you feel wonderful. Music should have a wonderful conveyance of spirit and joy and wonderful things. Mozart was the perfect fit for this. And so we looked last week at his Eine kleine Nachtmusik, and it became called Stil galant, or the gallant style, so that you can remember. And if I go through these too fast, it's so that you'll go home and use your PowerPoint and you can go through them at your own time. So now we're going to take a little quick look at, I mentioned the word tonality last week, and that's way too much to even kind of get into, but just think C major is one tonality, D major is a different tonality, D minor is a different tonality. So tonality led to the major and minor keys. And within the major and minor keys, there are other keys that get visited, and so we'll think about that. And I mentioned last week that this French dude, at the same time Bach was writing his preludes and fugues of the first book and gathering them, Jean-Philippe Rameau in France was codifying how harmony had come to be very predictably moving. Each harmony would move most happily to another harmony, and that would move to a different harmony, and then that would get you back home. So there was a hierarchical structure or order to harmony. So kids in piano classes have to learn these little progressions. And those are the basic harmonic progressions, they're called. Or you have this, wait. And then, and so harmonies progress in certain ways. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're interested. Okay, so that is the idea of harmonic progression. And so harmonies gravitating to other harmonies came to make sense. So I think you can just do a deer, a female deer, and re, da, da. So if you think that way, certain notes lead to other notes, and certain harmonies lead to other harmonies. And I'm not going to go through this in detail today, so forgive me. But if you get the hint, you can go home, and this will be on your PowerPoint at home as well. And so here's a normal scale, so that if you don't read music, at least you hear it all the time. So there's do, and Barbie could point to the notes with the laser, but you get the idea. So there's re, and there's mi, and there's fa, and sol. And so do and sol are so important, because everything in sol pulls us back to do. So the pink note is that chord, and the blue note is that. And this little note right here is called, that's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And what does ti do? That will bring us back to do. So ti leads to do. Does that make sense? Ti also leads to a nice conversation if it's afternoon tea. But there's ti do. So I thought I was a pretty good pianist until my younger brother upstaged me in a little recital where he finished his piece, or so he thought, and it was something like, and this note didn't sound. So he went, and the teacher said, if it doesn't work, just go on. So he went back to his chair, and it just bothered him. He never became a musician. Pretty good farmer, though. And he went back to the piano. He just had to hear that note. And he brought down the house, and I might as well have gone home because they had everything they wanted to know about entertainment. So then, that's those parts of what you already know, but you may not have known what to call it. So you have then all these things. So up here, let me get my clicker. And so that pink note has a name, and it's called, and I think of it like next to the main note, which is the first note of the scale, which is called tonic. I know gin and tonic, you know, we don't offer it, but this is a different tonic, and it means the tonal goal, the tonal center, the tonal foundation of a piece or of a scale. And when you get to the fifth note, you are on the dominant note, the next most important note. That's what I think of, the dominant note. And the next to that one is just below it, if you're in your scale, and it's called the subdominant, meaning below. So if I had this note, which is F, if you read music, right there in the key of C, there's your subdominant, and that's the harmony. And then that goes to the pink harmony and back to the blue harmony. So that's that. And then kids learn, and this is all not in one Monday morning or Tuesday morning class, but over the course of their first semester, they make sure that everybody knows the fundamentals or the foundation. So then you start using Roman numerals, because this is the first note of the scale. So big capital 1 means it's in a major sound, major triad, major chord. The second note of the scale, supertonic, super means above. When a soprano sings, we think it's just the soprano, but sopra means over, higher. So the sopranos sing higher. Alto is lower. Tenor has another meaning, but I'm not going to go into it right now. Tenors like to hold their notes. So the word, the ah, for like 10 minutes, Pavarotti's holding his high note. And so the tenors love to hold their notes, let's say it that way. And tenor comes from tenere, which means to hold. Does that make it interesting? And that had to do with Gregorian chant, but we're not going to talk about that either, so sorry about that. So you have all these interesting terms which all factor into how music is constructed. And Mozart knew all of this inside out. So looking again, now that the moods can change, the opening theme of a sonata, first movement of a sonata usually, is going to be very vigorous and energetic. And I'm going to see if I can get the beginning of this. You can hear, hopefully not too loud. Now, I have to interject here to tell you, I learned between last week and this week, for the maybe first time in my life, I've wondered, why do they say sometimes misinformation when we know it was a lie? And then I learned that misinformation is really, truly, when you don't know you're lying, and you're just giving misinformation. A lie is when you know you're lying, because it's an intentional deceiving or misleading. So when I said last week that the score of the Mozart showed 2 violins, it didn't mean 2 violins, it meant first violin and second violin. So I was correct in telling you that the score could be played by just 5 people. And you'll see in a moment that just the beginning, there are just 5 people. 1 violin, 2 violins, 1 viola, 1 cello, 1 string bass. That's how Mozart scored it. But he wasn't saying this is just to be played in the home. It already was a piece for orchestra, without oboes, without brass, without anything else, just no percussion, only strings. And that was a wonderful combination as the world of strings was establishing and very much growing up and growing up. So here, I don't know if I can get you to see what I'm looking at on the screen here, but you hear it sounds full. It doesn't sound something's missing because every part is covered by a single instrumentalist. Only 1 first violin, 1 second violin. So it's really so wonderful that music has this versatility. So that opening, bum, 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 bum. Last week, Barbie talked to you about how important rhythm is. You go bum, 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 bum. That's a rhythmic gesture or a rhythmic pattern, and it's repeated. Then it goes up first, and then it comes down. And it went up in that, if I went back to the other screen, it's using the blue chord and the pink chord and then back to the blue chord, if you think of it that way from the previous screen. So going back to this, then the second theme would be elegant in a different way, contrasting, usually gentler, singing, probing, emotionally sensitive or sensible, and in a related but different key. So we're going to experience that a little bit. The Mozart Eine kleine Nachtmusik first movement is a perfect example of everything that is sonata allegro form. What does allegro mean? Just somebody knows. A lot of people, yeah. Quickly, fast, or we think of it as a fast tempo, quickly. Energetic, it might imply that as well. So that's part of what we're thinking about. And this first section that we'll look at a little bit together in this third bullet here is called the exposition because it exposes all the thematic material and harmonies and structure and all kinds of great things. The second section develops those ideas. You're seeing that in the fourth bullet here. And that is something we'll look a little bit at. And then we're moving towards Marjorie's coming to play, so I'm keeping myself going. And then everything returns to the home key, that tonality, the tonic, the tonal center of the piece. In this case, the Mozart's first movement is in G major. It migrates to D. I use the word migrate instead of modulates, but in theory you learn the word is modulates, or moves from G major to D major, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol. So it moves to the key that starts on the 5th note of the scale. And things like that, and if it's a little bit vague, it's okay because you're getting it gradually one by one. Each week we'll go a little deeper into things. Then everything returns to the home key, and the piece, and I wanted you to see this wonderful example. This is Mozart's manuscript. Okay, who remembers how many years did that sit in a dresser drawer after he wrote it? Who remembers from last week? Anybody? He wrote it in 1787. You can jot that down. And his wife sold it to a publisher in 1827. 87 to 27, 40 years exactly. And it just sat there. Nobody knew it existed. This great piece. And remember the title, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music, just some music he wrote for an evening. And he didn't give it a title. It was just what he wrote in his little catalog of things he'd written, he'd composed. Isn't that something? But what I wanted you to notice, there's not a single scratch out anyplace. And it isn't that he had the greatest penmanship. It was a little bit illegible almost. But he had already perfection in his ear. He knew every note. He knew every note of every part. And they all added up to the most glorious music. And he said, and I mentioned it last week, he said, I don't know how it works. I just receive it. And it's there. The whole symphony is there. I just have to sit down and write it out. think of it. I mean, that's genius. Anyway, and not so many people are of that stature of genius or that level. So there are his scores for the first movement of Eine kleine Nachtmusik. Just 3 manuscript pages. Quite a blessing for all of us. So I wanted to play a little bit of this, but I want to get to the score, so I have to do it a different way. So before we move on, you're going to look into listening a little bit, maybe not all the way. This is your key. This is the G major chord. And here's your rhythm. Yum, bum, 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 bum. They didn't have dancing laser pointers back then. But, so, yum, ba, da, 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 bum. And it looks like you should go, da, 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 da. But this note right here, and we'll talk about it as we go along these 5 weeks counting today, 4 more after today. They would snap those da 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 ba da bum, ba da da ba da bum, ba da da ba da bum, and that was, everybody saw the notes how they were written, but they knew how to play them, and that gives the rhythmic energy and rhythmic propelling or propulsion. And right in this moment of this, and I'm going to point as you listen. So wait a minute, go back. Sorry. There we are. So this is, it sounds like you're still in G major, but D major is so closely related. So, now, right here, I'm finding my way here. I'm here, and then it's C, D, E. And instead of playing a C natural, he adds in a C sharp. So very cleverly, he's moved us into the key that's called the dominant related key of D major, which has a C sharp in it. That the G major only has the F sharp. The D major adds a C sharp. And there's all kind of wonderful ways that we get kids excited about that. Okay, your assignment's due tomorrow. But if they're interested in all this, it's fascinating. It's just amazing. And so we're in now D major. And that's what all the sonatas would do something to get into a related key, because it'd be boring to stay in G major forever. So the D major, you'll feel it. It's just joyous. And it's D major. Everything blue is a D major chord until this end of the first section. And this is the end of the exposition, which exposed all the ideas. And John Koenig pointed out last week that this particular piece, or this movement, has a very short development. And in the development, you start in the key of D major, but you see there are no more D majors, kind of, because it's swirling around through different harmonies. And that's where the composer, it's like their sandbox, their playground. They get to leave all the rules and just do the greatest other possibilities for those themes. And so it's very short, but that concise, let's use the word concise. And then it comes back to G. And Mozart writes on his score, we won't take time to look now, but you can look at home. And there's a whole section where there aren't any notes written. He says, go back to the beginning and play till measure such and such, and then we're going to stay in G major for the rest of the piece. And there's one more page of this particular score. It came out to 5 pages, but all the pink notes are G major, or pink harmonies. So I want you to listen a little bit, and I'll see if I can point out. We may not go through all of it because I'm keeping track of time for Marjorie here. Yep. Oh, thank you. So here we go. I'm going to get over here, and I'm going to get it started, and then I'll get back and point. And Barbie's being very patient. Look at how elegantly patient she is. No, I know. It doesn't need to. elegant second theme. It's gentler, lofty. We're staying in D major. All those chords are blue major chords. I'm going to skip the repeat. Now we're going into the development. Okay. Now I got to figure this out. That went by pretty fast, but it's taking us back to G major. Here it comes. G. Be gentle. It can change from vigorous to gentle in a moment because the mood could change. But it's going to stay totally in G major from here to celebrating the victory of G major. Still G major. And those were the same notes that took you to D major earlier, but now we're staying in G major. Isn't that cool? I mean, just the best. We played this, Marjorie and I, for a church concert last Wednesday night, and they said, you can just play that every week. We have four Wednesday nights at a little celebration of a gift to the church. Okay, that's what we're playing this tomorrow night, this beautiful romance, but let me get to that, and I'll pause. I want to maybe come back to the development, but I can't. I don't have time. You will at home. And does that make some sense? Raise your hand if it makes a little bit of sense. So you're getting contrasting moods, keys evolving, changing. The development could go through E major, A minor, D major. It was just the playground part where all the genius of the composer and the composition could kind of manifest in all kind of other possibilities. So to this day, the sonata allegro form is a mainstay of every symphony, of almost everything. At least it informs the writing because it's so versatile and stable and successful. Sonata allegro, the fast movement of a multi-movement sonata, more often than not in sonata allegro form. So moving on. So this is the other thing I really want you to get a drift about, because last week, do you remember we did, those of you who were here, raise your hand if you were here last week. I don't want to incriminate you if you weren't. But we talked about, like, instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, because 1 starts it all, that musical phrasing often starts with a pickup or an upbeat or a gesture that starts the motion right away. So you start on 8. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Say it with me. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 1. And the Chopin harp etude that I played for you last week, great. You can come out and just sit. Applause for just sitting nicely. And behave. And for behaving herself, she gets rewarded. Okay, this is Marjorie, and Barbie's going to play as well. So we're moving on, and this is the example. Oh, great, wonderful. No extra charge, but no more applause. You just quietly. Okay, so Chopin's Aeolian Harp Etude. What a great piece! And so we did this last week, and I made the 1 a little bigger because the 1 is an emphasis. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, what I want you to take home with you this week is a thought that is not often taught in music schools because it's part of a study called Delcro's Eurythmics. And we would learn in class for a year. I took this course, and it told me so many things I never knew about music. I felt them, but I didn't know them. So we go 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2. And the idea was that if you move to the music, people dance, for heaven's sakes, that you are embodying the feel of a phrase. And that's too simply stated, but it was a year of study, and it was a great course. Right, so we're here. You're not going home until 365 days from now. So this is the this is the Krusik family. And so if you get the gist of something, is that different from getting to the crux of the matter? What can somebody just say the difference between gist and crux? Anybody? So the gist is the general idea, right? I see what you mean. But the crux is now, I want you home by 10 o'clock. Did you hear that? 10 o'clock tonight, curfew. You know, that's crux. That is critical. That is a total point that you're making. So a crux is a point. So if you are in, Anna is a prefix that means before. It can mean other things as well. It can even be a name, Anna. But Anna Krusik, there are notes that lead to a crux. And a Krusik moment is the peak or crux of a phrase. And metamorphosis beyond the caterpillar is a chrysalis or cocoon. And then there's a butterfly. So there's metamorphic things. Meta means beyond the morph, beyond the change. Metaphysical means more spiritual, beyond the physical into the realm of the esoteric and also the spiritual, even religious. And so meta means beyond. So there are notes that lead to the crux, and there are notes that subside from or ride the energy of the crux to their natural completion. And with that in mind, and I'll just play a little bit of that part that we went through last week, I did some lead-in notes. So if you want to quietly just clap along, I'm just going to play the melodic notes first. So you have this first, and the beat. So this is 8, because it's before that bar line. And here's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. That I didn't quite outline the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5 is the crux, the blue note. Maybe Marjorie, could you point those just while I play them? It's the little guy there. See how she's useful as well as ornamental? Whoops. There's just a little red button. It's this up right there. And then the light comes on. Okay. So why don't you just say 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. You need some help with the red button. Okay, here we go. We're in train. We're all lifelong learners. Okay. Can you feel the subsiding after the crux? And that's so helpful to know. I mean, otherwise we're just thinking louder and softer. But if you feel flow energizing toward a crux, not necessarily speeding toward the crux, but flowing and energizing toward the crux. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3. That's a crux unto itself because he shortens the phrase by half. 8, 1, 2, 3, or 4, 1, 2, 3. And then there's a 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And Chopin was not mechanical about this. It's all intuitive. You know, just the little tiniest change makes it not just more interesting, but is the truth of musical phrase. So here's one version. 5 of those plus 1 different note. But then the next time in the second line, so he changes that, he moves that so-called wrong note up by 2, and then he goes even higher. Does that make sense? It's just not just repeating ad nauseum. It's sharing the depth of his heart. I added some green notes because the hidden notes inside are actually now active in an interesting way. So this guy was so deep as a composer. Have any of you heard this? Thank you. Have any of you heard this saying about poets, and poets would include visual artists, it would include probably even journalists and painters and dancers and musicians, artists. So let's just say the word artist. An artist finds his or her voice at the age of 40. It's an interesting thought. And it's probably typical because, do you know that saying, if you, after 10,000 hours of study of a certain art or experience with it, you have become a master of that art? Something like that. Well, this would have been a problem because Chopin died at 39. And Mozart died at 35. So thankfully, some geniuses are accepted from this. And Mozart was writing already great pieces. When I was 5 years old, I made up this little piece, and I think it's my opus 1, but I think it's also opus posthumous because I never wrote anything else, really. And so it was this. I was 5 and I hadn't had my first piano lesson yet, but I could play by ear. So, and I even made words to it, so. And it's like twinkle, twinkle, right? So it's not even that creative. And I was 5, and I thought that was okay, because I wasn't thinking I'm 5 and I should write something. And I had words, and it was, once a clown went to town on his head upside down. And that was my song. Once a clown went to town on his head upside down. Now, when Mozart was 5, this is what he wrote. And that was just the first half. And yeah, well, that's why I always liked you as a student. That's why we got along so well. So Marjorie's going to play here momentarily, but you get a little bit the idea that music can flow toward a crux and from, and we're going to repeat, this might become our theme for this year. Last year we talked so much about the dissonance and consonance thing, and I will come around to that too, because, and I just have to say this much, that first blue note at the beginning, there, that was the blue note. And those are wrong notes, and they're called appoggiaturas, and they don't belong in the chord, and they're dissonant. But they are what makes the music even more beautiful, more deeper. And when you hear those wrong notes, somehow you just have to get back to the right notes. And so that's expressive, musical expression. So we're going to keep talking about these things, and I think we're ready for Marjorie to play. This is, yes, yay! And, ooh, 10 minutes late, so let's keep, can you double tempo, please? No. So Marjorie, dear Marjorie and Barbie, both such great friends and musicians, and Marjorie has a recital coming up in March, and she's already playing great pieces and getting ready for her recital, and she's going to play these tomorrow night as well at a little concert we have going. You don't need any page turning, right? You wanted to tell a little bit?
Yeah. So I was just trying to think of putting a recital program together, and Florence Price's music has become really hot these last few years. I mean, her music was just discovered.
It helps for the MCAT.
You know, kind of recently. What year was that? Just a box of music.
Recently.
Recently. Anyway, so I just thought, my students are doing Florence Price. I thought, well, I want to do some Florence Price too. And I came across this piece, In Sentimental Mood. And I thought, well, I know that title. How do y'all know that title?
Say
Yeah,
Duke Ellington.
Yeah, Duke Ellington, In a Sentimental Mood. So here Florence Price has In Sentimental Mood. And so Duke Ellington's In a Sentimental Mood was written in 1935. And you think of the Duke Ellington Orchestra, and you think of the Harlem nightlife and all of that. And then you think of Florence Price's In Sentimental Mood, that was written about 1947, I believe. But you think that surely with that title, it must have been inspired by Duke Ellington's In a Sentimental Mood. And I found out that it was. And what she does is it's not an arrangement of the Duke Ellington piece, but it's more like an homage to it. And you'll see sort of that, I guess, just from the score, and there's sort of a rising figure in Duke Ellington's In a Sentimental Mood, and what she does is she sort of takes that and puts her own twist on it. You know, creates her own form, her own structure, her own style, her own flair. So it's quite different. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the similarities, but so In Sentimental Mood will be on my recital, but I just thought it'd be kind of fun just to play a little bit of Duke Ellington, so I pulled this off the internet.
You're going to recognize that opening theme song. Da 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 da. Someone to watch over me. Da 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 da. So was that an inspiration? Maybe, but it's almost a quote, but it's not that piece. So you will enjoy that in both pieces.
We should put the lights down, right?
Ooh.
Smoky.
Everybody, close your eyes, please.
After hours.
Yeah.
I felt like the lid should have been down and somebody on top of the piano smoking a cigarette.
Or the lid should have been up. But then you can't see the screen. So. Michelle can do the smoky.
No kidding. All right, here's the Florence Price. That will be easier to be played from memory, because you're kind of, leaping all over the place, looking up and down. So, yeah, it's on its way.
Oh, yay, thank you so much. So, just quickly, I'll move along here. Thank you so much. Sounds great. So here's Duke. You can listen to Duke's actual recording that he made, I want to say 1935-ish. Anyway, that will be available to you. And then this is the Florence Price, not played by her, but by a very fine pianist. So you'll get to hear that at home. And here is Papillon. Barbie, come on up. No, I really want to do the, yeah, you. Oh, oh my gosh. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? So Florence Price, a black composer, was very underrepresented. I won't know. You could look up on, you learn a lot from Google, even if it's just what else to read. But she was, I think, one of the people whose symphony was premiered by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, or at least performed by it. And not all those more obscure composers were honored in that way, but she was an Illinois person. Anybody know? Yeah, Herb.
I've heard some of her music, but I was struck by both the similarities and differences in those two sentimental moods.
Yes.
And there was a note of almost triumph in the second one that was more prominent.
Right.
And what had happened between, you may recall, was a little something called World War II.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point, because this was 1947.
1947, 2 years
After the war ended.
after the war. And
There was a jubilation, wasn't there?
yeah, I was struck by the difference in the sentiment, in the sentimental moods.
Yeah, thank you. Other quick thoughts before Barbie shares a little bit more about. Did you get the question or the gist of that? The gist, maybe not the crux, because it wasn't critical in that way, but it was a wonderful thought. Thank you, Herb. Okay, she might want the mic. Yeah. Okay, here. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So that point that he made about the jubilant mood of the piece, Marjorie's Florence Price version was a waltz, a one, and you really felt like getting on the floor and dancing. And the Duke Ellington version, to my mind, was more introspective a little bit. So it's very, very interesting, the comparison of the moods. Now, if we go to Schumann, Robert Schumann composed a piece called Papillons in 1829 and 1831. And he tried to turn a masked ball into music. So the whole piece is little vignettes, little tiny vignettes describing a masked ball, people dancing, people's costumes. One might be a sort of clumsy old man in a drunken state. Another might be a very, very delicate little group of women sort of in their little costumes.
Here are vignettes.
So, yeah. So you'll hear just a very simple introduction, and then it goes right into a waltz, and then each little variation is different. And he dedicated the piece to his 3 sisters-in-law. So I thought that was interesting. It was a sort of a description of a party, a masked ball.
Also, he was only 19 and 21 years old when he wrote these, so another genius manifesting early. The very end of the piece, I'll have the score up for just the last 2 pages.
Grandfather's dance, yeah.
Yeah, the grandfather's dance
Yeah.
at the end. And you're
Yeah.
going to hear, this is a ball. All these vignettes are at the ball. And so at the very last piece, you hear the clock strike 6. Now that's 6 a.m. So it was an all-night party. And it wasn't to write paper for music history. It was just the party and the celebration went on into the wee hours, and then suddenly it's over.
The waltz that I begin with after a one-line introduction is the same melody that comes at the end, that the clock interrupts it. And so it fades away as the clock becomes more prominent. So you hear a wonderful way that he utilizes actually the middle pedal on the piano, which I don't even know if it existed then.
Yeah.
That's what we use it for now.
So at the very end here, I'm going to ask David to share some music and thoughts with us, because it's not very often a student comes back after 40 years. But for him, I'm going to play my nocturne. I'll play it for you next week. If anyone wants to stay for a few minutes after the class, you're welcome. Just put it that way. Okay, this is right. In music history, that had never been done before, right? The ending, or
I don't know, he didn't put the middle pedal in there, but very important.
so the chord. Just stop a second. Listen. So he makes the bottom note disappear, and the next to the bottom note disappear, like every guest is leaving from the party. Last guest is gone. Day has to gone.
Where I like to do it. Absolutely, through here, if you can.
Well, that pedal.
If you can catch it on that, yeah.
There's a yeah.
Yeah,
There's a middle pedal that
yeah, now put the middle pedal,
every.
the middle pedal only holds down the one that you put the pedal on. If you play other notes after that, it'll only hold the one you put. That's right. That's right. Exactly.
So it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's not one big blur.
You can play it.
No, you can play it.
Okay, so you,
I hired you. Come on.
it's a perfect example of how to use a middle pedal, although he doesn't say to use it. I don't know if even they had a middle pedal then.
Well, yeah, Dave.
I just got a question. It's kind of related to this. The evolution of the instrument, the piano,
Yeah.
did it influence the romantic composers to compose differently, to think differently, or was it vice versa?
It was both. Yeah. So the music demanded a better and bigger piano, and then the piano afforded greater opportunities for composers. Definitely the pedal inspired everything, right, as it came in. We talked a little bit about that. You can review those instruments where you finally have a pedal, and then that was a new thing, and then it evolved. And so Barbie and I played a duet once at the recital here, and recently somebody reminded me of this, and let's see, how does it start? So it's Barbie plays. And right away we discovered at the beginning of a recital that the pedal was constantly on. I said, Barbie, we can't go on. And she said, you mean our friendship? And I said, no. Anyway, and so I just knew what was wrong, because it's called the sostenuto pedal, has a rail, and if that gets misplaced when the tuner puts the piano back together, it can hold every note on. So I said, I think I know what's wrong. I need a screwdriver. And somebody, yeah, I took the piano apart and fixed it, but when I said I think I need a screwdriver, people told me later, I'd like a vodka martini, and all of that. Okay, Dave, come on up, because we're going to just share, well, because I had forgotten some things, but then once he told me, it all came back, and it was just, I said, Dave, who did you study with in Great Falls before you came to the University of Montana? And he'll tell you in a minute. So let's pull out a couple chairs. Just
This pedal story reminds me of I got hired to do a wedding many, many years ago, and you know, you're always a slave to the instrument that's on site when you play piano. And I went into this church where I was supposed to play, and it had no pedals. The piano had no pedals. And I look at it and said, it doesn't have any pedals. And the guy goes, are those important? And I'm like, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's David. This is absolutely spontaneous. I looked up Steve after 40 years through a mutual friend of ours, Barb Miller, formerly known as Barb Beck. She teaches out of Spokane, and she said, you need to get a hold of Steve, which I did. And I called Steve, and he so graciously let me visit yesterday and stay in his home. And he said, I'm doing this workshop today, and would you like to come and speak? And I said, I'd love to. So I wanted to just let you know that, I was here from 80 to 85. God, it's so long ago. And Steve is my all-time favorite teacher, except for maybe Mrs. Shoemaker in kindergarten. She gave me cookies. So. But Steve, going with the bird analogy, Steve took me under his wing. I came in, I had no understanding of music, no idea. I didn't even know how to read, nothing about it. But I was hanging out with some friends of mine that when I first got to college, I was a forestry major, no musical experience, and we used to hang out and listen to classical music. And I was inspired by that music. I had very little experience with it. And I said, you know, I think I could do this. And so I walked down here one day and talked to Don Simmons, who was the former chair, dean, and he introduced me to Steve. And like I said, Steve said, well, let's put you in basic theory groups and classes. And then I was able to eventually study with Steve, one of the great honors of my life. So my point is that you're never too old to begin this. That's the main thing. And if you have a passion and an intrinsic motivation to do this, that's all you need, man. Just sit down, and that 10,000 hours can go pretty quick in a couple of years if you're playing. You know, it's just a matter of the reinforcement, the joy it brings to you, and it doesn't matter what it is. It might be music, it might not be, but find some passion in your life where you can engage in the flow of it all.
Well, tell us a little bit about how everything we do leads to something else. So somehow he used his music in his life, and tell us.
Yeah, so I've eventually got a degree in music education, courtesy of U of M, and then I went down to Arizona, just kind of moved down there for a while, and I stumbled upon music therapy, and I always wanted, it was a perfect marriage for me because I was always into psychology and, of course, music, and so I studied and did 2 years there, got my degree in music therapy, and I went on to be a music therapist for many years of my career, working at Oregon State Hospital in Salem in Department of Forensics. Eventually, I got into other specialties of therapy, but I always used music to reach my patients, and it's the great equalizer, music, and even the most coldest, hardest, uncaring people in the world I could bring to tears with music. And it wasn't me, it was the music, of course, but it reaches everybody.
Dave was a mental health worker in the state of Oregon for, among other people, criminally insane, and people that had a reason why they weren't in charge of their lives and did things that they shouldn't have done, and he was part of their therapy and their healing. And told me last night about a particular person, if you can just quickly share.
Just one story, because how it reaches. So there was one patient that came in many years ago, and he was in for multiple murders. It was a SWAT incident, and he had killed several officers. But the point is that he was a schizophrenic. He was extremely cold individual. He hadn't talked to anybody in 6 months after the crime. He hadn't talked to anybody, and he was brought into the state hospital to be able to get to court eventually. Well, I had a group when he was just sitting there and kind of almost catatonic, and everyone just left him alone. They knew he was a very dangerous guy. They just left him alone. And this other patient requested a song, Harry Chapin's Cats in the Cradle. Now, if you know about that song, it's a song about a little boy wanting to spend time with his father, and the father said, not right now, but someday we're going to have a good time then, son, we're going to have a good time then. And then eventually that boy grows up, and the father becomes old, and he comes around. He says, I'd like to spend time with you, my son. And the son says, not right now, but we're going to have a good time later. We'll get together. And so I was playing this song, and I saw a single tear come out of this guy's eye. And at the end of it, he just kind of looked over, and he said, that was my dad. And that was the first words he had uttered in 6 months. And because of that one song, that one moment in time, he was able to, it really just opened him up a little bit, enough to where we were able to get him back to court. He could talk, stuff like this, but that was his first communication with a human being in over 6 months because of that one moment in time with his son. The recollection of his father ignoring him, neglecting him, and the sadness that it brought. But it's still a very powerful moment in his life.
And the music was the
was the catalyst.
Yeah. So play us a little
Okay,
something.
yeah, I'll play a little tune. This is we'll go with the waltz theme again. This is a piece. I played a little bit of Scott Joplin earlier. I'll play. This is a piece called Athena. It was a waltz he composed after his wife Freddie passed away in 1905. Only after 10 weeks of marriage, she died from pneumonia, and at this time he was deeply in mourning. But he also wrote the most beautiful waltz. It combines good classical waltz style with ragtime music, and also, speaking of Steve's tonality, every section is a different key. Hopefully I can do it.
So I dare say it's the only student I ever taught who had never played a note and came in and wanted to be a piano major. Isn't that something? But this, I think, is a great thing about this university, that it cares about everybody, and everybody deserves a chance. And look what happened. And even this person that he helped and worked with in therapy deserved a chance, right? So that person, yeah.
That's the thing about mental illness. They truly don't know what they're doing, and it's a difference between being cognizant of what you're doing and not. And this man, he's a product of his madness, you know, and you can't blame him.
Well, are there any other quick comments, questions, anything before I think we're at time, so I know many of you have to go. Anything? Yes?
You don't have time for this, but what's the difference between Scott Joplin and Mozart? That's kind of why I'm here.
Well, yeah. You wanted to share your thought?
The next class.
Yeah, there's not as much difference as there is in common, right?
Yeah.
Style and training. Joplin was self-made.
No, he was actually
Oh.
trained.
Oh, okay.
He had a German teacher.
Great.
Classical. Scott Joplin, even though ragtime in the day was a body type of music that was only, you know, played in brothels and red light districts, he wanted to elevate that style of music into a higher art form. And he struggled all of his life to do so. He actually wrote 2 operas and 1 ballet as well. A lot of people don't realize that. But he was trained classically. He knew classical phrasing, harmonies, counterpoint. He studied in college. And he wanted his music to be respected. But he himself knew that it was only going to happen decades after his death. But you know what's interesting is because of racial injustices in Europe, Joplin's music was much more accepted and respected. And Debussy did Gollywog's Cakewalk, Brahms did a piece, Stravinsky did a piece as an homage to ragtime. And so they did recognize his genius, even though America did not as much.
So how many of you know Garnet, the ghost town? So I went there this summer with friends from Boston area that wanted to see a ghost town. And they now have a piano that was given, it's in the old saloon. Every note works, whether it's beautifully working or not. So I'm sitting down and I'm playing a part of, well, all of it, but. And so now I have an invitation to do a recital next summer. You'll all be invited up at the old ghost town. Yeah, I don't know if drinks will be served because the bar is closed, but bring your own.
Our newest Molly class.
Yeah, Smalley. What is that? What?
Oh, I said our newest Molly
Yeah,
class.
right.
We'll have to talk
A
about
one-on course. Anyway, it was great fun. So next week then, and thank you.
that. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.